Welcome back to Cheche, the program where opinion counts. The State of the Nation address provides a report card, if you will, on how a country is doing on meeting its targets. It also sets priorities going forward. We're questioning those priorities with Atsango Chisoni and Kaguri Mbogori, and we've been discussing women, gender, human and sexual violations. Before the break, Ms. Mbogori, I asked you very briefly to give me the highlights of the report you submitted last year to the President. Could you tell us what those were?
Yes, well, briefly, we did touch on the TGRC report and the fact that it had neither been discussed in Parliament, it seemed to have been shelved, and recommendations of the TGRC, of the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission, had not been acted upon. So we did urge for that to be taken on. Then we did mention the corruption that was endemic all over, and holding persons, corrupt persons, especially within ranks of government, accountable. We talked about disparities in education, and especially in some of the disparities we had noticed in various levels of education, including higher education. We did talk about violations that were taking place, I think, almost all over the country, especially in the municipal and towns and cities, especially by now they used to be called city askaris or county askaris now, and against whether hawkers or people who violate the bylaws. And I think we also talked about a whole host of other things which we had observed and monitored and written short reports on, and touched on human rights in counties as well.
Do you make recommendations? Are you expecting any action to flow from the report?
Every report has our findings and recommendations, and there are a host of recommendations that we made. Yeah.
Okay.
Has there been any action on some of the issues? Do you think there's been a response?
I think there has not been response to a lot of the recommendations, but again we use various means of engaging. For instance, we continue to engage the Parliament, and you see that at least the Parliament now has a Parliamentary Human Rights Association, and they have been very critical in terms of contacts within Parliament who are interested in championing human rights issues. They launched their strategic plan yesterday. Now, unfortunately, this is not a standing. This is not one of the standing committees, and that therefore, even in terms of parliamentary procedure, there's a limitation right there. We don't have any parliamentary committee with the words human rights in its name, but we, as the National Commission on Human Rights, fall under the Legal and Justice and Legal Affairs Committee.
Right.
Atsango, comment on this. I think we miss the point every time we fail to inculcate the culture of good ethics right from early childhood. I think we should emulate our neighbors in Tanzania who regard one another as ndugu and dada instead of huyu mwanamke. Henceforth, let's teach kids to appreciate one another.
I agree with that, and I think we need to look at this as something that requires both long and short-term strategies, and also a multiplicity of strategies. I think we need to understand as a public that the justice process is actually a chain. You know, there's the investigatory component of it, there is the prosecutorial component, and then there is the component where you come before the judiciary, and once the judiciary has pronounced itself on the issue, there is then the enforcement of that judgment. So if any one of those arms in the chain is weak, then we have a problem. Because even if you bring a weak case before a judge who is progressive, there is only so much that judge can do with that case if there are technical weaknesses. So I think it's important for us to strengthen all the different steps. In terms of the other components to it, there's also the aspect of public education. And I think what the person who made this comment was alluding to is that what are the values and how are the ways in which we're passing values on to our children. I would like us to look at this from both the formal and the informal components.
And what would that look like?
So from the formal perspective, that's actually quite easy to address. It's about having issues like this in our curricula for the schools. I know various civil society organizations historically would have things like human rights clubs in schools. But if the Kenya Institute for Education is willing to collaborate with us, then we could go further and actually formalize it. What I think we struggle with is actually the informal. So we need to understand as a society that the subliminal message, and I don't know the easier way to put that, but the unconscious message, which sometimes is far more powerful than the conscious one, that we send to society when we treat with admiration people who violate human rights, is actually very dangerous. So it's no use going into class for children to hear that it's wrong to steal, that for the children who are Christian children, for example, to go to Sunday school and hear that the commandments say that, thou shalt not steal. But to then go over there and see somebody, when their parents are watching news and they're sitting next to them, who is alleged to be a thief, continuing in office. It completely undermines all the Sunday school teaching. It undermines everything that's happening in the Quranic schools. It undermines whatever it is you have put in your school rules, because they're basically being told, the message we're sending them as a society is that it's okay, that in fact you get rewarded for this kind of conduct. And so that's where we need as a society actually to make the break. It's not so that I don't see the challenge being as great in relation to the formal system. It's the informal messages we're sending when we don't, when we seem to not only condone, but actually admire and celebrate people who engage in this kind of conduct.
You want to come in?
Yes, I just want to say that, I heard PLO Lumumba say something which I thought was very profound. And he said that to expect the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission to stop or end corruption, it's like to expect a cancer treatment center to stop cancer. It comes from outside. And I just thought that was very profound. We are corrupt. We as Kenyans are very corrupt. And what is more, as Atsango says, we literally celebrate corrupt people. If a person goes out there and steals humongous amounts of money, we celebrate them. We invite them to our churches and to our communities to bring the largesse of their thieving and what they have stolen. And we celebrate them. And what a better reward than that? We encourage them.
We vote for them.
And what is more, we vote for them. And we know exactly what they have done. In fact, they have conned us. Time and time again, they have stolen from us. They have stolen our public utility plots. They have done us bad. They have done bad things, but we are the ones who vote them in. And in a sense, it's that this is who we are. And until we accept that, corruption doesn't come from outside. It's coming from us. And the fact that our leaders, we may even vote the current slew of leaders out, but the ones we vote in will come in even hungrier than the last lot, and the first order of business will be to increase their own salaries. And that, how many times has that happened in this country?
Okay, so Atsango, I'll come back to you then. We're talking about values. Corruption is the broad framework. What then are our values when it comes to women? Sexual violations, human rights. What is the value system then that we're inculcating?
When we are silent in the face of violence, then the value that we are inculcating is violence by our silence. And so hence the value of actually saying that this is wrong. It does matter when the senior most leader in this country, who is the president, says that this is wrong. It matters because whether you like it or not, there is a lot of people who admire the president. Mm-hmm. So when they hear from somebody that they admire that this is wrong, it might make them stop and think about whether or not they should be condoning that kind of behavior. So it does matter what our leaders are saying. And State of the Nation is an opportunity, the State of Nation report is an opportunity for the president to address the nation on the matters that he considers to be important. Those people who voted for him are waiting to hear what he thinks is important. They look up to him. So it's in terms of behavior change, the benefit in terms of addressing those issues is actually quite high. But what I'm also saying is that we as a public also have to demand it. Mm. We have to make it clear to him that we as a public are concerned that there are issues which are destroying our society that he is not addressing himself to.
David, we have the 2/3 gender rule deadline coming up in August of this year. Within the broader conversation, gender relations, the omission of sexual violations, what we see in general, do you think that we've done enough to effect the gender rule?
Obviously not. I think not much has moved on that front, although I have information that there is preparation made in the course of this year. They should be tabled.
The deadline's in August.
Yes. I think there is preparation to table certain, either amendments or provide for mechanisms to achieve the 1/3 gender rule, as the Supreme Court ordered before the end of this year. But I mean, that is really in the legalistic, in the legal approach. But in terms of just society, of course, rising up to that expectation of the Constitution, which I always hold the view was extremely high, given the society's structures and infrastructure of how we relate, work, and live, to generate that automatically to post 1/3 into elective and appointive positions. It wasn't likely to come. So we needed the law to enforce that. But again, we failed because there was no goodwill to get that done. And I don't think much has happened. But as Kaguria said, that really now belongs in the box of the Gender Commission of
Well, then, I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you, though, because Atango has made the point about public expectations and leaders reading the public mood. The public mood, Mutegi, I'm not sure what you think. And certainly what we've seen is that Parliament has tried to reverse this, has tried to reverse the quotas that we have for the election of female representatives into the National Assembly. Wherever you look, it does seem as if whatever space that women have accrued to themselves, the National Assembly is trying to claw back. So can it just be the work of the Gender Commission alone?
I don't know why you believe it's trying to do that. In fact, I don't think the Parliament is trying to do so. The way it is structured right now, in fact, I think ought to be changed, because it's simply blowing up offices or institutions.
There were attempts last.
I don't know that is law. I think it's the country itself. The way she mentioned about patriarchal system of men dominating. If you look at the countries that have achieved much of that, like Rwanda and the Scandinavian countries, it's the way people live. The people, children are treated, or women are treated as equal by the society. If you look at even elective or even appointive, for instance, boys and girls are going to school and universities almost 50-50. But how many, for instance, chiefs do we have who are women? How many DOs do we have who are women? How many magistrates do we have who are women?
I'm sorry, I need to intervene.
Yes.
These things do not change by allowing culture to change. Mm-hmm. You have to put in, you cannot have a system which legally, deliberately excludes people and expect those people to catch up with the rest of the population. You have to put in place systems that deliberately enable the people who've been left behind to catch up. For example, up until independence, there were schools which African people could go to, which were not given the same quality of facilities. When we got independence, the best school for girls in this country, for African girls, was Alliance. Do you know that Alliance girls did not have a physics lab? So whether or not you were a smart girl who wanted to study physics, you simply did not have a place. Because if Alliance, which was the best girls' high school in this country, did not have a physics lab, where were you as an African girl going to get a chance to study physics? So let us come some 30, 40 years later, after independence. When you're offering jobs that require an engineer, for example, how many women who has 15 to 20 years experience, how many women are you going to have that are eligible? And you can take that and apply it across the board. And so we have to have special measures in place. These countries that you're referring to, Rwanda, we actually tried as the COE to put in place a system that we had in Rwanda. It was rejected by the Parliamentary Committee on the Review of the Constitution. So what has been missing in Kenya is a commitment at the level of political will to addressing this question. And that is why Kenya is an island of embarrassment. That is why every single person who surrounds us actually has a much higher percentage, if you take it from a racial perspective, of women in office in their electoral bodies, because they have been willing to take the measures. The way Scandinavia addressed it, which is the same way as South Africa, is to address their electoral system. So they don't have a first-past-the-post system, which is what we have over here. They have something called proportional representation, which allows flexibility. So you vote basically for parties, and it allows the political parties to then choose who will represent the party in the various institutions.
In a
and with that system, it's very easy, because you can then have a list that puts woman, man, woman, man, woman, man, and you can also have a list that includes person with disabilities. In that list, you can have a list that includes people who come from ethnic minorities, for example, who you know will never get a chance. For example, the Wata, how many are they? The El Molo, how many are they? So all those groups that are historically left out, you end up with a system that reflects that. The other system that has been used is what is used in Uganda, where you have reserved seats for certain groups, okay, which have had less access, okay, to office. Rwanda uses a mix of both those systems. And that is how they have ended up with a 50%.
But this would be a gradual process, right? You recognize that this would be a gradual process.
You have to put in place targets. If you leave it to gradual, as independence,
targets
the British
over a certain, like, say, you know, some of the things in the Constitution are by 2020, you know, are by, 10 years to achieve certain targets. Because if you do that rude intervention, you could occasion injustice to others in trying to create an equality. All right?
Okay, let me maybe jump in here.
Go ahead.
With your kind permission. First of all, I'd just like to say that inequalities between men and women, boys and girls, just like we talked about corruption, this is entrenched in the psyche of our people. I'll give you an example of sexual violence cases. If a notorious thief is given to breaking into houses in your neighborhood, beating people up and robbing them with violence, when that person is finally caught, everyone begs for blood. Actually, some people want them killed.
Yeah, they killed and the tires burned
something like that. And you would see people, even people would be very happy to do that. But a notorious sexual offender does not evoke the same kind of outrage as when people lose a car or property. Phone. But the effect of the offense is so outrageous that, in fact, a person who rapes a young girl, for instance, completely wrecks that life. But our outrage, when that person is maybe imprisoned for life or given maximum sentence, it's too much, it was only sex. you know. And I just want to say that that is where our inequalities lie. Long before we even come to the institutions of law or legal frameworks, that we ourselves don't view offenses against women as very serious offenses. When a woman is beaten by a spouse, for the longest time in this country, because I did work in FIDA in the 90s, we'd go to plead with policemen to actually even take her report in the OB. Hiyo ni maneno ya nyumbani, endeni mkamalizie huko nyumbani. And it has taken a lot of time and awareness and having them reporting those who refuse to take those notes, because offenses against women don't cause the same outrage. And what is more, there are even women who advocate sometimes violence against fellow women. For instance, you might even have a mother-in-law saying, huyo ana mdomo mkali, wacha apigwe na mumewe. And that time it's your son who is beating your daughter-in-law. So what I'm saying is that this is what then gets reflected in our institutions, and law is an institution, and that's as Asango says, unless we deliberately take steps to ensure that equality is not only recognized but actually implemented, then we won't really get anywhere. Okay. And the same reason causes people to be very, very resistant to implementing that kind of equality.
Ms. Mugoria, listening to you earlier, quite a few of our viewers were fairly disappointed and made the remark that women are their own worst enemies. I'll qualify that by giving the example of, say, collaboration. Say, women in parliament, we have Kewopa, who incidentally came out to ask for a gender unit in parliament in response to sexual harassment from their male colleagues. We have women in the executive, we have women in business, we have women in politics. Why do we see no collaboration, as we did in Rwanda, which we've discussed here, to affect the quality of legislation that we're seeing coming out to protect women?
Thank you very much. First of all, I don't accept your premise. I reject it. Gender violence is not a woman's problem. It's a societal problem. And answers and solutions to gender violence will necessitate the involvement of both men and women. There are a number of very good programs and initiatives that have taken root in this country. He for she,
which the president launched earlier this year.
Yes, no means no. And there's a group, I think it's called the Ujama's initiative, which is training youths, young men, to be defenders of women in their area, and these are taking root, and I think that's the way to go. Thinking that gender violence is a woman's problem is a problem in itself, and it does not lead to solutions that we seek.
Could I just
very quickly?
I just speak on that? I think we need, as a society, to decide whether or not we think there is something wrong with the society where people who are considered to be weaker are constantly subjected to violence. Do we as a society value peace? Do we as a society value security? And then we need to make choices as a society in terms of how much we are willing to do to ensure that all of us are at peace and that nobody has to worry. One of the things I loved about Lamu many years ago when I visited was that I could walk at night. I had several female colleagues. We had gone to do research. We walked, because anyway in Lamu, you don't have much by way of transportation other than the donkeys. But, we walked. We went to the hospital. We did some research. We spoke with the supervisors. It was dark by the time we were done. We walked. That is about the only place in this country where, as an adult female, I have a recollection of being able to feel that I could walk. and not worry. I don't know about the situation today. I want a Kenya where every single person can walk in peace, where I don't have to worry about if a 5 or a 6-year-old is sent to the kiosk, like some of us were when we were children. I don't have to worry that she or he may be grabbed by somebody who will try to rape them, because little boys are being raped as well. It is not just little girls. I don't have to worry that they're going to be disappeared. So what are we willing to do as Kenyans to make sure that that is the kind of Kenya we live in? And we're not going to get there by blaming any one segment of our society. We have to be willing to be a stand for a peaceful and secure Kenya, where we all have an equal opportunity at a good life.
That's a good point to take a break. This is Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV, and we'll be back after this break.